Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 54 of the Primetime Rundown interview series powered by StreamYard right here on the Eastern Observer, I-95 Sports Network, and Zingo Television Channel 198. To this point, we can't thank you, our audience, enough for tuning in every week because this does not continue without your support. That being said, we are excited to welcome in for episode number 54 of the Primetime Rundown interview series, the Athletic Communications Director at Union College, Steve Sheridan. Steve, thank you for taking some time with us this evening.
No problem. Ian, thanks for having me.
No, we're happy to have you as we continue to profile those of us in the athletic communications industry. And as a reminder to everybody that's watching or listening, please feel free to join the conversation at any time. Drop in a comment in the comment box, and we will be happy to try to get to it during the duration of the evening. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that tonight's interview is available for download in the iOS or Google Play stores, or you can subscribe to the Primetime Rundown. We are now available on Spotify and iHeartRadio, or you can search I-95 Sports Network on YouTube. It's really just that simple. Steve, very happy to get the housekeeping out of the way, but before we got on the show here, while we were backstage, we had said it's been quite a year. So I'm going to come in a little hot here on you, but for all of us, I mean, we're just surpassing the 1 year mark of the COVID-19 shutdown, not just for Division II, not just for Division III, but for sports everywhere, college and professional alike. So for you and your family, how have these last 12 months been?
I said it's certainly been a year. For me personally, March 13th was my son's birthday, and that was the first. Wow. That was the first day that I worked from home. Was his birthday. We had Union had their first COVID case on the 12th, the day before, and so my AD came in and said, you're not coming into school, you're not coming into work tomorrow. So March 13th was kind of bittersweet that we just passed his second birthday, technically, I guess, in the COVID era. So it's been interesting. I think the stock answer is to say, oh, it's been great to spend more time at home with your kids and my wife, which has been very nice, but it certainly was challenging, especially at the start. We had to try to pivot to homeschooling a couple of kids for 3 months. That was a bit of a challenge. My staff, other members of my staff got furloughed, so I was kind of by myself there for a few months, and it was a bit of a challenging summer. We came back in the fall, and I think the spring was really hard just because it kind of came out of nowhere. I think, I remember we had our last lacrosse game was on March 11th. We had a big win there, and I sat in the press box afterwards for a couple of minutes, I think knowing that something was going to be happening relatively soon. So I'm like, I'm just going to sit here for a few minutes and kind of enjoy this for a little bit. And, sure enough, that was the last game that I have seen live in person since then. So, that was kind of a shock, and that the fall and the winter was kind of just like paper cut after paper cut, where it's like, you think it's happy, you think it's not going to happen, but you don't know. You get some positive news, then next thing you know, you lose the fall, then you lose the winter. And, for us, we lost our Division III sports. We also lost our Division I hockey programs as well, which was a whole different level of losing sports. So, it's been certainly a lot of up and down, but I think we have our spring season, which hopefully, fingers crossed, is starting in about 20 hours from now. So it's nice to have some good things to look forward to after the last year.
Yeah, and even though I work in the Division II landscape, I still follow everything that happens in Division III and in Division I, and to see the announcement the announcements that came down that Division III was not only going to cancel their fall championships but their winter championships, and in Division III, it was such a domino effect. It was just one conference decided we're not going to play, and it's kind of one domino toppled, and everybody else kind of went with it. You had mentioned to me backstage as well, Steve, that you have two kids at home. I believe you said 9 and 6 years old. And what must that have been like to have your kids being at home, learning in that remote that remote environment, and you yourself also dealing with that remote environment as well? How were you able to balance all that?
It was tough. I mean, especially once middle of March came around, I was basically getting up at 6 a.m. My wife works from home, so she was kind of set a little bit, But, we'd both get up, we'd work from, 6 to 8 or something like that. The kids would get up, we'd do their couple hours of schoolwork, and then I'd kind of go back to doing my own work from there. So just, this blip in the middle of the day where it's like, yeah, sorry guys, I'm just not available to work right now. Obviously, there's less things to do, I guess, in some capacities at least. So it worked out a little bit, but my wife used to be a teacher, so she's used to teaching and doing stuff like with kids. We agreed a long time ago that I would not make a good teacher. So it was a little more challenging for me to sit down and teach math and things like that. I joked, my kid had a final presentation that he was doing over Zoom, and I was more nervous for that than almost anything that I've been in my entire life. Just sitting there watching him on the computer doing this presentation, holding up things. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is so nerve-wracking right now. So, the spring was definitely tough, but we're very lucky that our kids have gone back to school this fall. They've been 5 days a week, full day for the most part. That the school system up here has done a tremendous job in keeping the kids safe, and that's been a real blessing for us, for our kids to be able to go back to school and see their friends. I think that was the biggest thing, is that those first couple of months were, they were kind of driving themselves crazy, just the two of them in the house with them and us.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things where this summer, my wife and I have been talking for a little while, like, hey, maybe this is, we should be looking for houses, or I go house hunting. We're in a 2-bedroom apartment. The kids are sharing a room, and we said, you know what? They're going crazy. We got to do something about this. So we ended up moving in October into a house, which has been very nice. It's gotten the kids their own rooms. It's given us a little more space. And obviously, moving during a pandemic is not the ideal situation.
No,
it's been it was good for us to get our own space and to have a little more room for everyone to kind of be by themselves when they need to.
Well, the pandemic kept everybody far apart from each other, but at the same time, it allowed us to do a lot of things that maybe we didn't see ourselves doing in that short a time frame. Maybe like buy a house. Here at home for me, it was a lot of the same as what you were going through. I mean, my wife is a speech teacher, so go figure, right? Same professions that you and your wife have, respectively. My wife's a speech teacher. I'm an SID, and we have a 2-year-old who daycare is closed, and all she wants to do is play with mommy and daddy, and it's hard 5 days a week to tell her that you just can't do that. But I want to get back to something you had said earlier, just because now it's on my mind and I have to ask Steve. So you work with college students every day, and you're molding young minds. So what made you think you wouldn't be a good teacher?
I'm not patient enough. I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, I think it's one of those things where, I might have somewhat of a temperament, but I'm not someone that's going to be teaching someone. With my own kids, it's okay. I can work them and get on them a little bit, but I feel like in a classroom setting, I don't think I'd translate incredibly well.
So getting back on track to what's happening for you in your career, especially right now at Union. So when did you go back to the office, and are you back at the office right now? Because I know you said your first game is tomorrow. So are you still working virtually a little bit? Are you back in the office 5 days a week? How's it going for you right now?
I mean, we're in a little different situation. I mean, the last week or so, I've started going back into my office every morning just to kind of get myself in a habit. I go in for a couple hours and I come home, make sure to get the kids off the bus at the end of the school day. So if nothing else, to try and get me into some sort of, going to the office, do some things, come home, kind of get into a habit there. But, I haven't seen my office a whole lot, but I've been on campus a ton. I mean, our athletic department is basically running the testing center for Union. So, ever since July or early August, I've been on campus 3-4 days a week doing stuff in the testing center. So we've spent a lot of time on campus doing things, just not the normal things that we're used to doing in the office. So, we've been in the gym and the field house and those type of places. But for the most part, I've been camped at my dining room table with my laptop and speaker, and that's basically where I've been sitting for the most part for the last year or so, with a few minor adjustments.
I'm sure for you that first day back, I'm sure there had to have been maybe a little excitement, but at the same time, the nerves starting to go a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I joked to someone a couple of days ago, said, I've been in my office for a couple of days now, and I already missed my double screen when I come home and try to do something somewhere else. I'm like, where's the second screen? It's amazing how quickly you get accustomed to things. So,
yeah,
it'll be good to kind of go back, trying to ease my way back in. I think, our athletic director, it's one of the things where you be in the office when you have to be. And I think that's a good thing. It's not, you're not forced to be in the office and we've learned, obviously in the last year that there are many things we can do that aren't in the office, that you can do virtually, you can do from home and virtual meetings and things like that. But at the same time, you miss the people. And I think it's funny the testing center that we have at Union in many ways has turned into like the social club where people go there in order to interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You have colleagues that are professors and things like that they don't see each other except at the testing center. That's the one place that you're allowed to go and see people. And I've
Let's
actually
hang out and go get tested for COVID, right? It's,
exactly. I mean, it's funny. I've talked to some of my colleagues more this past year, in quarantine than the previous couple of years before, just because I'm seeing them every day or every couple of days, and you're kind of forced to see people being in the testing center. So
sure,
it's been nice to have that social interaction and go back in and see people. And you see the athletes come through and they take their tests. And especially the last couple of weeks, when we announced that we were playing games in the spring, they're excited, they're getting ready for practice. It's nice to see the enthusiasm and see those positive faces every once in a while now.
We had mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, but I want to come back to it that the Liberty League and Union College announced its intention to participate in spring sports. We'll get to the fact that, as we had said, that Union's going to play its first game in over 365 days tomorrow. So coming out of the COVID pause, as we had said, there were no fall or winter championships in Division III. There was no athletics across the board in Division III. So Union ultimately is set to play its first game, by my count, first game in 380 days. So your chance here, Steve, what's the feeling like for you right now?
I mean, there's so many different feelings. I mean, first and foremost, I'm excited for the athletes. We had our spring athletes that had their seasons cut short, and in some cases they weren't started last year during the spring. So we have a softball team that hasn't played a game in 2 years, essentially.
Wow! Right.
We had our men's lacrosse team last year was 5-1. They just beaten a nationally ranked team. And we thought they had a legitimate chance of making a run in the national championship, in the national tournament, and to have that season cut short. You had one player who was potentially going to break the school single season career goals records that couldn't do that because his senior year was cut short. So, to have the kids come back, I think it's really exciting. I think they're really excited to get back on the field and play. It certainly is a little nerve wracking for me, having been setting up a video. I'm trying to get back in the habit of how to set the video up for games and what things we're supposed to be doing for games and pregame protocols and all that type of stuff. So it's a little nerve wracking, and at the same time, also, I'm currently in a one-man shop on myself. Not COVID related. My assistant, started his own business, moved out west. My intern got a full-time position in October. So, I'm very happy for both of them. But at the same time, it was a lot easier to be myself in January and February than it is now going to be in April and May. So,
right.
It's going to be interesting. I have a great group of work studies that I'm going to be working with, but it's going to be a very busy. It's going to be a sprint for the next 6 weeks, and we're just hoping to get through it. That's the big thing, is trying to get to the finish line. And if we have to start slow and miss a couple of games at the beginning, if we want to finish strong and get to the end of that season and try to hopefully get some conference tournaments and NCAA tournaments.
Well, Steve, I wish you and Union and all of your student athletes, your administration, coaches, et cetera, all the best of luck. And hopefully it all culminates in the end come May with some Liberty League championships and some NCAA tournaments, because I know for you, Steve, and your student athletes, it's more than overdue.
Yeah, it's certainly something they've been waiting for a long time. I saw the softball team out at practice today, and there's seniors that haven't played since their sophomore year. It's crazy to think that they've gone so long without playing, and I think just for them getting back on the field and just playing any sort of games is a positive. So hopefully the more of that we can do, the better.
So, Steve, let's turn back the clock a little bit. Now we're going to kind of channel the path of your career. And we always start by talking about really who was your inspiration and what grew your love of sports. So you're originally not from New York. You're originally from Westford, Massachusetts, which in the New England area is suburban Lowell, almost just about on the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border. So I don't even kind of want to ask this question, because when you ask a sports fan that's originally from New England how they got into sports, usually the answer is pretty obvious, because just the life in New England, being around the Red Sox and just growing up around sports, it's so hard in the New England area not to just fall in love with it. But what grew your love of sports, Steve, and really drove your drive to want to work into the sports field?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a Boston fan all the way through. Going to New York for 10 years was a bit miserable, having to be a Boston fan and going down, living in New York City for a while. But I mean, for me, I always loved. When I grew up, I wanted to be the next Dan Shaughnessy. I wanted to be the next Boston Globe journalist and sports writer. And that's I loved reading the newspaper every day. I consumed the sports section. I took that before my dad got to see it every morning, just because I wanted to read the paper. And even my neighborhood, when I was younger, we had a bunch of friends who were all about the same age, and we played pretty much every sport known to man. Full 5-on-5 field, street hockey games and baseball games and soccer and everything. So I think we were just so involved in sports when I was younger. It just it really got ingrained pretty quickly in me. I didn't necessarily think it was something I wanted to do as a career, but it was just something that I really enjoyed playing sports. I enjoyed watching sports, stereotypical, be sitting down with your dad and watching the Red Sox every night for, years on end. It gets ingrained in you. And I think when I eventually moved out and, got my own place, I'm like, this is weird. I'm not watching baseball every night. Like it's like something's what's missing in my life right now. But it's just funny how quickly those things kind of get ingrained, just doing the same thing over and over again, watching the same things, the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Celtics, the Patriots,
Yeah.
It's fun watching those things over and over again. It's something you can do with, kind of as a family. And I enjoy doing that with my son too. We sit down on Sundays and we watch football. It's basically the one sport that we sit down on the weekends and we just sit there and just watch football. And it's fun. It's fun to do. And it's a good way to, spend some time with your family.
And it's not too bad that when you're a Boston fan, that whole area of New England brings home as many championships as they do every year. So
I can't complain. It's been a pretty good run for Boston teams. I remember the Patriots losing to the Packers in '96, and pretty much ever since then, it's been a pretty good run.
It's been okay. It's been okay. That Bill Belichick guy has done pretty well. Steve, I would ask what brought you to New York, but you went to school. You went to college in Central New York at Colgate. I will get into your extracurriculars, because that really is a big part of why you are where you are today. But you, in fact, didn't major in a field that was, or I should say, you didn't major in a communications related field.
No, Colgate did not have communications as a major, and that's actually one of the things. When I was choosing colleges, I was looking very much between like the Ithacas and the Syracuses, which are hardcore communication schools. But I wasn't positive that was something that I really wanted to get into. So I decided to go with a really good overall school at Colgate, and I loved it. I went there for my visit and really fell in love with the place, and it's a wonderful school. I love it there, and I think instead of having a major in communications, I think I really kind of, as you said, the extracurriculars tried to immerse myself in a bunch of different things there, and getting guys firsthand experience, which I guess looking back at it now, I think in some ways it was almost better for me, because I'm not in a classroom trying to get a grade. It's more just I'm trying to do stuff that I want to do, and I'm trying to experiment and find new ways to do things. And I think that was a really good path for me, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I just got a lot of experience doing a lot of different things.
Well, some of those things you became involved with. You wrote for the student newspaper, the Colgate Maroon News, which is the longest running college weekly newspaper in the country, the television station, and you assisted in the athletic department, serving as one of the play-by-play announcers / color commentators for Colgate Athletics. So you receiving this such early exposure to the business between the ages of 18 to 21 years old, was this the stepping stone for you that drove you to want to pursue a job eventually in collegiate sports?
I guess, like, looking back at it, I guess it was part of. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily my intent. I think for the most part, I like being around sports, and I wanted to spend as much time I could as around sports. And I started with the school newspaper, and I got a letter the summer before, and like, oh, you can join the pre-orientation program and come to school early. And I said, oh, I can come back early and write for a newspaper. Cool, I want to do that. So I did that, and I moved my way up the ranks there. Assistant sports editor to copy editor to editor in chief. And that was my major passion in college. I loved working for the newspaper, and I loved being a writer and writing feature stories and things like that. And I know sometimes my writers didn't like me because I'm a real stickler for grammar and editing and all that type of stuff. So
I wonder why you work in the business you do now then.
Yeah. So that was fun. I loved doing that for 4 years. That was great. The TV station was something where it was just another avenue for me to do sports. We broadcast basketball games. We had fun there. I did some sideline reporting and some play-by-play for basketball for the campus TV station there. And from that, I got a little bit of a job work with the athletic communications department. I wrote some feature stories for the hockey programs.
Oh wow.
That went out every week during the hockey season. So that was fun. And, me and my friend just broadcast a couple of different sports. He had a job in the department first and said, hey, I'm broadcasting soccer, I'm broadcasting softball, do you want to come along and do it with me? And, this was of the age where we sat in the press box in the soccer field and passed a phone back and forth between the two of us, because that's how you could talk, in a rotary phone, going back and forth, talking to each other into the speaker, into the headset. So it was obviously a very different time than it was now. So
yes,
now that was fun doing that, and I think that's what it was to me. It was fun. It wasn't necessarily, hey, I want to do this as a job. And I'll freely admit, I had no idea what athletic communications was in college. When I was writing the stories about the football team, I was sitting there, 5 minutes after the game is over going, wait, why isn't the story up yet? Come on, it's been like 5, 10, 15 minutes. They haven't gotten the story up yet. And having no idea what actually goes into athletic communications behind the scenes and post game and all that type of stuff. So now I can look back at that and laugh at myself, because I had no real clue what business was at that point, even though I was involved in it somewhat.
You're writing sharply worded letters to Colgate's athletic communications office. I want to stick on the broadcast end, but then come back to the newspaper. So do you remember potentially what that first broadcast you did was for Colgate Athletics, and your nerves and everything that kind of went into it?
It was probably basketball, because I was a sideline reporter. I was the camera person / sideline reporter for the basketball games for a couple of seasons, and that was fun. It was just fun. I mean, I'm not someone that really enjoys public speaking or being in front of cameras, so that was kind of a step out for me to try to do some different things and get myself actually in front of a camera. It was pretty nerve-wracking. I remember one time in particular, I went out, I stepped in front of the camera to give my interview and realized I didn't have my microphone with me. And so I sat there and looked at the camera for a second, and then just sleeplessly just walked away, went behind the camera, like, all right, well, that was a mess up.
I have no audio.
Like I'm talking, but no one's going to hear me because there's no microphone here. So I just, back to you guys, So it was fun. It gave me my first experience, talking to coaches and trying to do like pregame, scouting reports and trying to figure out what coaches were doing and thinking about going into games. And it was just got me into the mindset of being a coach at the college level. So it was fun for me to do. We got a play on ESPN Top 10 my sophomore year and my junior year. That was really fun. Just trying to be like, hey, my camera's on ESPN. That's cool. This might be something that's neat down the road. So it was fun. I think that was going back to the grade thing. Like, I'm not trying to get a grade from a class. I'm not trying to impress a professor or anything like that. I'm just going and having fun with some friends. And
sure.
I mean, it worked out really well at a school like that, where pretty much the entire TV station, everything was was student run. There was no advisor. There was no one there to tell us what we can and can't do. It's just, can we figure this out? Sure, let's figure it out. Let's do it, and let's go have fun with it.
Let's circle back to the newspaper now. And you had already mentioned how you worked your way up the hierarchy in your 4 years at Colgate. So, what were some of the responsibilities and that you took on at such a young age? Just to, again, it's a school organization, and you lead it as you wish, but you're really setting the tone for how you see yourself going forward after you graduate from college. So for you, what were some of the responsibilities that you took on early on, and then ultimately when you became editor-in-chief?
Yeah, I would say I started out, just as a writer. I wrote, I think about tennis and a couple of, minor sports. That's what you do when you're a freshman. You write the minor sports.
Sure.
And became assistant editor towards the end of that year. And the newspaper was basically built where you start at the bottom, and you can, if you're interested in wanting to do it, you can move your way up. So I did that my freshman year. My sophomore year, I became the sports editor for the national sports and the Colgate sports sections, and that was more fun because I got to pick the sports that I wanted to cover, and I picked the football team, and they just happened to be 13-0 and go to the national championship game that year. So that was a great year for me to pick the football team. So that was fun, and dealing with hockey. Hockey was always kind of the big job that everyone wanted. Ended up getting that my junior year. So I think it gave me a lot of responsibility, and I think we were once a week newspaper. We weren't every day or anything like that, but we were putting out 36 pages every week, and every Wednesday night I was up most of the night. Thursday night it was from 3 p.m. until 4 or 5 a.m. whenever I could walk the CD over to Campus Safety. They could bring it to the printing press that morning.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not something a full-time job, but there was a lot of work that went into it. So I think in that way, I guess that kind of prepared me for being an SID, where you have long nights, you have long deadlines, and you're trying to coordinate a lot of different people. Especially in the sports section, I had about 7 or 8 writers that worked for me. Once they got up to copy editor and editor-in-chief, you have an entire paper. You have 30, 40 people that eventually you have to see everything that they write, and
mm-hmm.
basically everything that goes out on the paper is going to come back to you. And
yeah,
we definitely had some situations where we had some headlines, things that were written that were not maybe the best choices long term, but you think it in the moment, and it's like, what, it was a mistake. You move on and you kind of go from there. But it allows you to take ownership of stuff. And I think one of my favorite things I got, at the end of my senior year, I get a bound copy of every newspaper from my senior year. So you can go back and look at every single one of them and say, I remember this article, I remember this story. This was a great week. It's something that's really fun to go and look back on and just, see what you've produced. It's pretty cool to produce, a 36-page paper every week at a school that didn't have a communications department, that we didn't have a faculty advisor. We were completely student run. So between that and, soliciting advertisements and doing the business portion of it as well, there was a lot that went into it. And it definitely, was a real good experience for me to, when you go out in the real world, you have a lot of things to do other than just the thing that you think you're going to be doing going in that day. Mm-hmm. So it was a real fun experience, and some really great people that joined me there. And, we took a lot of pride in it. I think that's the biggest thing, is just knowing what you've built, and you graduate, and then you see the people beneath you that step up into those new roles, and they take over. And, it's really something that's nice to see, that keeps going on and on year after year.
And also see, to a certain extent, just how far over the course of your career, from when you were a student to where you are now, how far your writing, I'm sure, has come along as well. When you look back at your time in college, and Steve, I think you and I both did our undergrads around the same time, and to think, where it is, where we are today, when we went to college, it was all about, in the athletic communications business, it was all about, running Stacker on your computers, writing up a game recap, posting it to the website, and maybe snapping a few photos. And there was no Twitter. Facebook was only for college students at that time, with maybe certain .edu email addresses. So we've no Instagram. So we've come such a long way. But Is there an experience or experiences that you took from your time there at Colgate that you still apply to your job today?
I mean, I know, for me, it was mostly about the writing. It was about really, going to a good liberal arts school. That's one of the things they always say is you come out as a good writer, and if you can't write, you can't do anything. And more than I think, because at that point, live video wasn't really a thing. So like my TV experience didn't really translate to athletic communications.
Sure.
It was basically my writing. And my first job out of college, my boss basically said, I wanted someone that could be a good writer that could come in and I don't have to, proofread their articles every day and those type of things. So, I think I even say that to people now, if you can be a good writer, we can teach you a bunch of other things, but you have to have that base of being a good writer, to have a good grasp of the language. And, I was a Latin and history major in college. So, I'm very big as a grammar nerd because you have to be taking Latin. So, that's one of the things that I really liked. And I keep kind of coming back to that as, when you have all these things, but I want to write feature stories. I want to kind of do those long form things, even though they're not necessarily things that most people care about these days or necessarily even want to read in many cases. But, I'm kind of a traditionalist in the heart of it in that respect.
All these years later, do you see yourself ever coming back and spitting out a little bit of Latin, or no, not really? That's far gone.
I mean, my wife was a Latin teacher. We met in Latin class. So actually, we became friends on an extended study trip to Italy. So that was our sophomore year of college. So I took 9 years of Latin. She was a Latin teacher for 9, 10, somewhere around there for a while before we moved up here. So
wow,
Latin is something that is still kind of in the back of our minds in our life on a daily basis. Our kids grew up knowing how to count until 10 in Latin and and stuff like that. So it's been fun. It's something that we share, and it's a cool thing.
You had mentioned that in your time working for the student newspaper at Colgate, that the year that you chose the football as your sport to write was the year that they had reached the national championship in 2003. Do you consider that your favorite moment in your time at Colgate?
I mean, it's certainly one of them. There's part of me that wishes I had gone to the national championship game in, I think it was Alabama or Tennessee or whatever it was, but at the same time, they lost 42-0 to Delaware, so it wasn't exactly a great game. So probably would have been disappointed if I'd actually made that trip down there just to lose like that. But I mean, that was certainly one of them. I said we had a game-winning half-court shot that made ESPN. That was a pretty cool thing to be on a broadcast for. Got to see our women's basketball team make the NCAA tournament for the first time, and it's basically one of their only good seasons almost they've ever had. So that was really fun. I think there are just a lot of little moments. I think, like I said, my trip to Italy in my sophomore year, I wanted to go abroad, and I didn't necessarily want to go abroad for an entire year, but we took this little three-week trip with our class to Italy, and that was really fun. So I think, in terms of athletic moments, I think the football one definitely is up there. The Colgate Cornell hockey games every year were really fun. Sure. Throw huge packs of big red gum on the ice when they come on. That was always fun. That's one of the things I love now, being able to go, we're close enough now. We play, in the same conference as Colgate. We get to go back to campus every year. We go to watch the Colgate Union hockey game on campus. And that's fun to be able to go back and, see your professors and things like that.
Yeah, sure.
Close to have that connection to your alma mater. So it's fun to be able to do and be able to go back.
Absolutely. So in 2021 and in 2019, were you excited watching the Colgate men's basketball team in the NCAA tournament? I mean, they ran with Arkansas for a half the other day.
I was getting myself a little bit too excited, I think, watching that the first half. And they were up 14-15. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're going to do it. 2 years ago, I remember we were watching it in the press box. We had a lacrosse game going on. We had a couple of student workers. We had our iPads and phones out. We were watching the game, and it was fun to watch. And it's great to see what Coach Langle has done with the program, because, I mean, to be honest, when I was there in my 4 years, they weren't particularly good. So the program had a bit of a lull, but now they're really good, and they're entertaining to watch. And it's been fun last. I enjoy watching our teams, but I enjoy watching Colgate too. We're watching their women's hockey team in the national semifinals, a couple national quarterfinals a couple of days ago. It's fun to watch the alma mater and to see them do well on any level. So that's fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. So upon your graduation from college at Colgate, you broke right into the SID business. You became a post-grad intern at Northeastern for a year, where you even got some beanpot experience as the secondary contact for men's ice hockey there, and then spent a year at Division II Franklin Pierce University as the assistant sports information director. So can you speak, even though you were there for a year apiece, at both spots, can you speak a little bit on both experiences? Because at that point you're fresh out of college, you're still kind of getting accustomed to the business. So can you speak a little bit about the part that they played in helping get you where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're I wouldn't be where I am today without the opportunities that John offered me at Northeastern and Doug offered me at Franklin Pierce. It's funny, I mentioned earlier, how I didn't really know much about athletic communications. I mean, my senior year, I went to a job fair in Boston, and a sports job fair, and of course, everyone there's massive lines for WEEI and ESPN and the TV stations and things like that, because that's where everyone wants to work, the glamour jobs. And of course, I dropped my resume off there, and I'm walking out of the career fair, and there's this little tiny table in the corner for Northeastern University, and I don't even know why. I just walked over. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'll just drop my resume off here, whatever. Didn't think anything of it. And when I got the call from John about even having an interview, my initial reaction was, I'll get back to him when I can. I think he called a couple of times before he was like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, I guess I'll talk to you, whatever. I was completely blowing it off, to be perfectly honest. And it wasn't until after
interest.
It wasn't until after I got the job and I started. I remember, I was sitting there at my desk, and I turned around, and he was like, he showed me, he goes, see the stack of papers here? These are all the resumes of people that applied for your job. And I said, wow, that's a lot of people. That's interesting. Maybe this is a little cooler job than I had given it credit for originally. So that was, that was fun. And for me at Northeastern, we had a bunch of things going on, and I had two sports. I covered field hockey in the fall, and I covered women's hockey during the winter. I did a lot of stuff with men's hockey too during the winter. So I had a couple of sports to kind of get my feet wet and do things on my own. I remember the first time during the fall when we had a football game going on, and there was also a women's hockey game, and basically it was everyone stay at football except Steve. You go do women's hockey by yourself, basically.
Oh,
and I said, really? You're trusting me to do this by myself? I had a couple of the people with me, a couple of student workers or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're gonna go do this women's hockey game. So that was fun getting that experience. And it's funny for me. I mean, a lot of people may not know, but I kind of had a moment when I knew this field was kind of for me. Mm-hmm. We were playing, the men's hockey team was playing BC, who I think they were number one in the country at the time. It was somewhere in early January. And BC came out, scored a couple of goals. Northeastern came back, tied the game in the third period, eventually won it in overtime. And the crowd was going wild, and it was just a really fun night. And I was back in the office afterwards with my boss, John, and we were sitting there, and he said, nights like this are why you love this job. And that's when it really kind of hit me, where it's like, I could see myself doing this. It's like, those games like that, obviously not every game is, overtime thrillers against number one team in the country, but, it was fun. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I could, do a job like this where I'm having fun most of the time, that's a pretty cool job. So that was kind of the turning point for me. And then, from there, I was lucky enough to go up to Ringe and get the job with Doug as his assistant. And, he really, he gave me, 8 or 9, 10 or whatever different sports. So I kind of, went to the deep end there. Is that, you're the contact for these sports, and you're going to do this stuff by yourself. And if you need help, you call me. But other than that, you're the person that's doing all these things. So that was really, even when I first got there, he kind of said to me, he said, listen, you have some experience. You should be doing this for a year and then going off and doing something else after this. You shouldn't need more than 1 year being here and dealing with a bunch of different sports and coaches and getting the experience, you should be able to go off and do something after that. And ended up working out that way that, I had the 1 year at Franklin Pierce, and, it was really fun there watching some really good teams. The men's soccer team won the national championship that year. The women's soccer team, I think, made the national finals. The women's basketball team made the Final Four that year. Oddly enough, Doug took all those teams. He got all the good teams. I don't know how it works that way when you're boss. You get to get the good teams if you want them. But it was fun, just watching those teams and watching the successes that those teams had and the players and getting to know some people on those teams. It was a lot of fun. I think that was that was the biggest year for me, where I came out of that year saying, I think I can run my own department at that point. And I was lucky enough to get the job in Manhattan after that, and it's kind of gone from there. But I mean, those first 2 years, I mean, I don't think I certainly didn't realize at the time how hard it is to break into the athletic communications field. It's not easy to get in.
No.
You have to work long hours for not a lot of money. I was lucky that I was able to live at home, and I took the train into Boston every day going to Northeastern. I had a 50-minute one-way drive to Ringe every day going to Franklin Pierce. So it wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I was able to stay at home and to save some money up, and that was a big factor for me, to be able to get those two jobs, where not everyone is able to do that.
Hopefully, Doug doesn't have too much going on at Stonehill, and he feels free to comment. In your experience, though, let's jump back to Northeastern here for a second. In your experience, well, I would say, what's been the better experience? And I want to see if a little bias comes in here: a Colgate Cornell hockey game or a Northeastern Boston College game? Which one do you prefer?
I have to say Colgate Cornell, just because I'm more personally invested into that. Although now I say it's Union Colgate is my favorite, even though they're not necessarily great games. But
right.
I loved hockey. I think the job at Northeastern, like that year, made me fall in love with hockey.
Yeah,
that's what I really loved. Being able to do that, and it was a bit of a culture shock going from Northeastern to Franklin Pierce. The level of hockey a little different there, where the coaches didn't use line charts and we didn't have stat crew for hockey, so it was kind of a very different experience for me there. But I love hockey at the college level, pro hockey, and that's been one of my favorite sports, certainly to watch. I can barely skate, so in terms of playing hockey, that's certainly not happening. But I love watching hockey. It's definitely my favorite sport.
Transitioning, I guess, to your career at both places, at both Northeastern and Pierce, you had mentioned about going to work a women's ice hockey game by yourself, and then Doug putting you in a situation where he was putting you in a sink or swim approach to say, you take these 10 sports and you go flourish and succeed and move on to something better. So, where and when did the intimidation factor set in for you? Because at such a young age.
I think there's something said for just not knowing any better. Where it's just, okay, this is my job. I'm gonna go out and do it and figure out a way how to do it. I think in many ways, I try to do that with my assistants too. It's like, you train them a little bit, you give them basics, you give them an idea of what to expect, but for the most part, they got to figure out how to do it on their own. And it's a lot easier, I think, in some ways, to learn stuff when you don't have someone looking over your shoulder every time you make a mistake or something goes wrong. Doing stuff on your own is the best way to do it. So, I think for me, that was fun. When we did volleyball, we still did volleyball with hand stats at that point. So that was one less sport that I had to worry about doing stat crew. But, he threw me into basketball, and I'd never done stat crew before. He said, okay, you're inputting, I'll call for you, but you need to figure out how to input, and you need to, you need to get this stuff right, And I think that's the case where you just get in and you do it. I think it just becomes muscle memory after a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I'd ever seen lacrosse before I went to Franklin Pierce and had to do men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse there. And, I think just getting the experience of doing different sports, that's the biggest thing. I think once you're comfortable with the sport, once you know the sport, once you have the background in it, then it just makes it so much easier. So, I think that's just the best thing for me that I try to do is just you do stuff as instinctively as you can, you figure it out, and you get better every game.
You had mentioned that you completed your 1 year at Franklin Pierce and then moved on to accept your role at Manhattanville College in Westchester County in Purchase. And you called Manhattanville home for a decade. You were named their sports information director in 2008 before being promoted to the title of assistant athletic director for communications in 2014. Looking back first, what made Manhattanville so special and memorable to you that you ended up calling it home for 10 years?
I mean, I think it's a lot of different things. I mean, I know at the start, it was my third job in 3 years, so I went in knowing that, I wanted to stay for at least a couple of years. I had moved down to New York. My then girlfriend, now wife, was down in New York. So it was going to be the case for either she was going to move up to Massachusetts or I was going to move down to New York. And I happened to get the job in Manhattanville, and it worked really well that I was able to get that position. And, I was drawn there by the hockey teams because the hockey teams were very good at the Division III level. And so that was the reason why it came down originally. But, I like the idea of staying somewhere and kind of, making your market a place. I'm not necessarily someone that's going to be constantly looking out for the next job or the newest thing that's going to be coming up. I like being able to be at a place where you can, the coaches that go there for 3, 4, 5, in this case, in some cases 10 years, where you get to know them, you get to know their programs, you get to know the kids that go through the program.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real great thing. And, I think there were a lot of really good coaches at Manhattanville, and our athletic director Keith, who was there for a while, was a really good leader of the program. And it was a good place for me. And we started a family there. We were living in Queens, and we had both of our kids were born, and they in some ways they became kind of members of the community as well. I think they grew up going to Manhattanville games and seeing members of the staff and being in the office. I'd take them to the office all the time when they were kids and babies. They literally grew up in the office for me. And in some cases, they thought the office was theirs as much as it was mine. So, that kind of atmosphere was great, and I loved it there. I really enjoyed my time there, and it got to a point where I think the move for me was not necessarily a professional one; it's more just a personal one. Because as living in the city, living in New York City area, Long Island, Westchester, it's not the cheapest place in the world, and we had a small apartment with 2 kids, and eventually it became a time where it's like, we got to try to find a way to expand our horizons a little bit.
Yeah. In your 10 years between 2008 and 2018, the business transformed monumentally. We began to start, and I know I could just see from your reaction saying that, from incorporating more graphic design, the increase in live streaming, the rise of and the prominence of the use of social media to promote our programs and our student athletes. As technology, we've learned so quickly that as technology advances, our jobs continue to advance, and the umbrella of responsibilities that we continue to undertake continues to get larger and larger and larger. So, based on that, can you take me through your timeline of your 10 years in Manhattanville and how your job changed over that time?
Yeah, I mean, it changed monumentally. I joke that the last time I didn't have an assistant was my first year in Manhattanville, and there, Twitter wasn't a thing yet. Instagram wasn't a thing yet. Facebook was just a basic stuff, and our AT department broadcast 1 game per team per season. That was the level of our video streaming at that point. My first year there, so I mean, it's almost unrecognizable what the field is like now as opposed to what it was at this point 13 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things when I got to Manhattanville, when I first, I had my first year, I was by myself for a lot of it. And so I said, I gotta find someone, I gotta find a GA that can come in here and help my video, help start our video broadcasting, because that was, the thing that, hey, we need to start doing video now. That's the next big thing that we need to be doing. So, I hired Nick Schraier to come in and basically said, hey, you're a GA, you figure out this video stuff. This is going to be your pet project. And, he did a tremendous job for me for 2 years, and really laid the basis for what we were doing for the next 7 years after that. But it's crazy how the field has changed, and the social media has gotten, I mean, perhaps a little bit out of control, I think, in many ways. I wish, we talked about Facebook when we were in college. I didn't join Facebook till after college. So I was like, I don't need this. I don't want to be a part of this. And eventually, like, you know what, I'm missing too many things. I guess I have to join Facebook, and just, it trickles down from there, where, you have to be on all these platforms all the time, even though you don't necessarily want to be. I'm not someone that's, posting all the time on Twitter or Instagram or whatever the case may be, but it's almost like we're social media consultants, and the ethical communications part is kind of secondary, which is, I don't know if it's necessarily the way it's supposed to be, but that's kind of the way it is. And it definitely is a bit of a young person's field. And, I try to surround myself with assistants and interns and people that can do some different things than what I'm used to doing, because I certainly have ways of going about stuff that may not be the most exciting or technologically savvy. But that's how the field advances. And I think that's one of the things that, you see in an SID, like you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you get left behind. If you get left behind, then, you're out of a job. So, did I think I was ever going to be, doing tech talks and learning video streaming and all these type of things that, I don't really have a whole lot of background in, but you figure them out, you learn, and you do what you have to do. So, I think the field definitely from my first year of Manhattanville to my last year was, it was absolutely night and day. And just the way things change, some things for the better, some things maybe not necessarily for the better, but it's crazy to look back in 2008 when I would just go to a field hockey game and just stat the game. I don't think we even have live stats at that point. Just you stat the game and then you walk home, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then you write the game story, and that was it. It was nice, easy day.
Yeah, and to think about, you started there, you were 24, and then as you grew into the position, you left there, you were 34, and it's crazy to think that you and I were once, young up and coming undergrads, and now now we're the veterans and the trying to pave the way for the future for the future of our profession. And to see some of the names that you hired in your time at Manhattanville, Steve, like you mentioned, Nick Guerrero, who's gone on to bigger and better things, and Casey Shermick, another. It's it's just what people forget at the Manhattanville office is that you have two assistants, but that they're both also GAs. It's just to see who's come out of that office and turn, and transform their careers as a result of, your mentorship. It's just great to see, you give back, but also at the same time, it's great to see, those that are younger than us and those that, want to approach the field and have come into the field when, we're doing so much more technologically, are succeeding so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, that's one of my favorite things about the job. I mean, obviously, everyone's, when they say the favorite part of the job, you say the student athletes, because you love dealing with the students and learning them and seeing them succeed. But, for me, especially when I was at Manhattanville, I was hiring GAs. The kids were essentially pretty much either right out of college or a year or two out of college with little experience. So, I've had, a decent amount of GAs who went on either to be, D1 assistants or heads of D3 departments, going through Nick, Sean, Casey, Tim, Mike, Adam, maybe forgetting a couple there, but, I've had a decent amount that have gone on to stay in the field. And I think that's, I like that. I think it's something that I'm really proud of, that I've found some people that are interested in the field, that want to stay in the field, and that can make an impact in the field too. So, that's what I say to anyone on an interview, when I said, I want you to come here. I want you to learn, to get better, and then go off and do your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
You should be here to learn, and then you should be able to go on to bigger and better things after a year or 2 years, the case was in the GA positions there. So, it was definitely frustrating. You sometimes you'd get people raw. You build them up for 2 years. Just when they start to really be able to do things well on their own, then boom, they're out the door. You start from scratch again. It's just you have to hit the reset button every 2 years. And,
Yep. Yep.
I had one GA my first, for half of my time, and I had 2 GAs for the second half of my time. So, I always joke with one of my GAs, Sean. He was the last one where I was the one GA by himself, and I always say, it took 2 people to replace you once you left, because you left, and I got 2 GAs the next year. But it's amazing how much you have to rely on them.
Yeah.
And, when you're head of the department, you can't be everywhere. You can't be at every game. You have to rely on other people, and you have to show them your trust, and you have to train them as well as you can, and then let them go off and do their own thing. I think that's it's nerve-wracking, certainly in many ways, but that's how you get in this field, and how you you learn and go forward.
Well, we certainly miss Sean Engel in these New York parts. That's for sure. And I hope he's watching tonight. At Manhattanville as well, you were responsible for obtaining so much coverage for your student athletes from such nationally recognized media, whether it be ESPN, Fox Sports Radio, USA Today, and then you have the Journal News, which is the local recognized publication in Westchester County. So can you describe a little bit of what went into that, and specifically for those small schools, because Manhattanville is a small Division III institution located right off the the Hutchinson River Parkway, and not many people would know it if you were driving right by it. And what it really took, being a small school in such a large sport market such as New York, to garner that kind of attention. What was your approach to getting that kind of media attention?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of local stuff with Journal News, I mean, it was hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, they weren't huge into college sports. They're very much more high school sports oriented. And if we had a local player on our team who was doing well, they might give us a mention or come to campus once or twice. But it was difficult, and it's a tough, certainly a very tough media market to break in. We have people being like, oh, why can't we get our stuff in the New York Times? Like, well, because the Times has some other things they're worried about right now, other than a D3 men's soccer game. It's there are positives and negatives to be in those media markets. So, it helps when the teams are good. We started to get a little more recognition when our softball team was really good for a couple of years, and we get News 12 to come out, to practices and games and things like that, and Journal News would do a little bit. So it took a lot more of kind of digging and really trying to find the stories that would pique their interest. They certainly weren't reaching out to me for the most part for anything. It was more me trying to really badger them to try to find some things that would fit their coverage niche. So that was pretty tough, not gonna lie. In terms of the national stuff, I mean, it's a huge mix. I mean, you have some fluky things. We had our assistant men's hockey coach was called up to be an emergency goalie for the Coyotes one night at MSG.
Oh, wow.
And that was like the biggest story. He was getting a haircut one afternoon and got a phone call from someone saying, hey, the Coyotes need a goalie tonight, backup. How quickly can you get to MSG? And that was, plastered on the front page of NHL.com. We got him on, ESPN the next morning with Linda Cohn. That like stories like that just kind of come out of nowhere and sell themselves. And it's really, you didn't really do too much to deserve it. It kind of just came out of nowhere and happened. So, stuff like that was fun. For me, one of our most viral events we had at Manhattanville was during the government shutdown. We were supposed to be playing Merchant Marine in a men's soccer game. I'm sure if Joe Guster ever is looking at this, I'm sure he will give 10 size because I bring it up all the time. But we had a game against Merchant Marine that was shut down, and I was literally sitting in the laundromat one night, and I was like, it'd be funny just to write this, press release saying, game postponed because the government can't pay their bills. And, I got a fake quote from our men's soccer coach who was British, and I had a fake quote from him saying, this would never happen in Britain. We love soccer too much to cancel the game, things like that. And it exploded. And I think that was the first instance where I really realized that like people cared about Twitter and things could actually go viral on Twitter.
Yes. Yeah.
To the point where, I got a call from someone from USA Today, and they said, we just want to confirm that you actually posted this on your website. Is that correct? And I said, yeah, that was me. I posted it on the website. Like, okay, cool. We just wanted to confirm that. Yeah, I remember my AD was in, I think he was in coaches meetings up at Utica or somewhere upstate, and he was in meetings all day. And then I guess he got out of meetings and he had like, 20 phone calls from people. And he was like, what did you do? Why do you have all these phone calls from people talking to me about, have you seen your website? I'm like, I don't know. I put a silly story up there. And next thing you know, it's getting like, I still have it bookmarked. There's like a random like TV or radio station in Texas that wrote like, this is the greatest press release I've ever seen in my life. Whoever this person is, he deserves a raise. I'm like, cool. This is neat. I mean, nothing ever happened because of it, but
I totally forgot about it, Steve. Honestly, I remember it, once you mentioned it and you said, the story I wrote was about the government shutdown. And I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. And then you just rehashing the story is just bringing back all those memories. That's fantastic.
I was getting emails from SIDs across the country to be like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. Like, this is amazing. How did your AD allow you to do this? And like, I didn't ask him, to be perfectly honest. I just did it. Like,
so I have to ask, did you actually pull that down, or is it still living on the website to this day?
I believe it's still up there.
Wow.
I think, yeah, I mean, it should be. I don't see why it wouldn't. I certainly didn't take it down. I just wish I'd been, had been smart enough to run like analytics on it to see like how many retweets and things like that. But I remember, I think we had as many views of our website that day, that week as the previous like year combined or something like that. Like it just blew up. And I remember just being like, okay, so I guess there are people that actually, pay attention to this stuff. Like,
yeah, right.
If you do something, it's actually, people will care about it, whether it's positive or negative. So,
small Division III school. Who's going to pick? You guys were in the MAC at that point, right?
Yeah.
So, but still, like you were, whether you were in the Skyline, the MAC, or whatever it may be, you're playing a local school from Long Island, and who's going to pick up on something like that? Well,
I remember one article somebody wrote. They're like, they read this press release and they said the first thought that came to mind was, who's the poor schmuck that has to do the Manhattanville men's soccer beat? It's like, well, that's not really. There's no one's doing the Manhattanville men's soccer beat. It's just, you send a press release out to anyone to let them know there's no game. But yeah, so that was, I mean, something like that just kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, it was just a funny joke, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just run with it, and it just blew up, which was just fun. And then, and then obviously you have like ESPN like top 10 plays. You get like a really fluky volleyball play that got us to a top 10 once, and it was like just things like that where it's like, okay, you identify random plays or games and stories that just might resonate with people, especially in social media. Unfortunately, things can go crazy in that direction. So I mean, I think a lot of national attention for schools like us, it either has to be a really good story that you developed over a long period of time, or just something kind of fluky that comes up, and you just have to be prepared to take advantage of it as best you can.
I think you took the best advantage of it that you could, hook, line, and sinker. But I was going to ask, but I think you already answered this question. I mean, does that top your list of your favorite moment or moments in your 10 years at Manhattanville?
I mean, in terms of athletic communications, I think that one's got to be number one. But I think we have you always come back to certain teams. Like it's funny, like you have, certain teams, certain years that really resonate with you. I mean, for me, both my kids were born, when I was at Manhattanville, and, one of them was born right after a women's lacrosse game where, we had a women's lacrosse game that afternoon. My wife was being induced later that day. So, I worked the women's lacrosse game. We had a little get together afterwards. The team gave me a little send off, and I went off like, okay, go have a baby. He's like, okay, cool. I'll go to the hospital, pick up my wife now. And, it's like things like that is pretty cool. And, when my daughter was born, I was sitting in the office writing a post-game recap for softball after a game. And I was sitting in the office. She gives me a call and she's like, so are you close to being done? I'm like, yeah, I should be done in a few minutes. She goes, can you come home now? I said, okay. So I was doing, 75 miles an hour on the hutch, which was the safest thing in the world, but trying to get myself home. I remember I texted my assistant at the time from the hospital and said, I don't think I ever finished editing this article. Can you go back in and just make sure that, there's no egregious spelling errors or typos in this article? Because I didn't really get a chance to go over this one too well. I was too busy speeding home at the moment. So
yeah, your wife's ready to give birth to your child, and the first thing that's going through your mind is you're texting your assistant to say, "Hey, did you have a chance to check through that story for me by any chance?" I think that goes. I think Steve, that goes beyond the SID life hashtag, maybe.
But then I think there are just certain teams, certain years where just teams come out of nowhere. I think one of my favorite teams, I think, was the softball team for 2014, where they had 11 players on the team. So you had kids at the start of the season that didn't know what position they'd be playing, because they had, I think, 6 or 7 kids quit during the fall. So it was a really small team. There were zero expectations. They went in, won the conference championship, made the regional final. We had basically one pitcher the entire season who pitched almost every game by herself. And like a team like that was just something where it came out of nowhere. It was so unexpected. And it was just fun, like to watch them play every game. It was just a real, it was a delight for me to be able to watch those teams play.
Yeah, I bet.
Like stories like that are just, it's fun to be able to go and have good teams and know they're, you go to the field every day thinking, okay, they're going to win. The question is, by how much are they going to win? That's always fun to be able to have those type of things. But those type of stories, I think, are definitely the ones where those stick with you, I think, more than even the good teams, but the ones that, have those unexpectedness that doesn't necessarily happen every year.
Well, the case with your softball team would be the definition, in a way, of overcoming adversity. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's bring the timeline to current. You took on your role at Union as athletic communications director in July of 2018. Spent, as we had said, 10 years at Manhattanville. And sometimes we want to check off that box that we may not have yet in our careers, even though you had spent the better part of a decade at your prior institution. So what drew the move for you from Manhattanville to Union?
I mean, I joke that if I'd known Hamilton at that time, I would have just been going around saying, let's go upstate all the time. Because that's basically what our goal was for a few years. We'd been in Manhattanville for 10 years. We had our 2 kids. We were living in Queens in a small 2-bedroom apartment with, 2 kids sharing a bedroom. And, after a while we said, we want a little more space. We want to try to find a different place. So, as I think I said earlier, it wasn't even necessarily a professional move. It was more just a personal, where, my wife had family up here in the upstate area, and it was just something where we were looking for a change. And, I spent a couple of years kind of looking for some positions, and the Union position came around, and it was, basically it's a perfect fit in so many different levels. Mm-hmm. I mentioned I love hockey, so having the D1 hockey was phenomenal. But I also really like working at D3. You really get to know the athletes really well. You get to know them, on a much better level than you do, for the most part, with Division I sports in many cases. So I think for me it was really great to have the mix of D3 sports and D1 sports, and to be able to live a few minutes away from campus and not have the hour to 2-hour drive that I was doing every day, for the most part, going from Queens up into Westchester. The lifestyle change was much needed, I think, for all of us. And our kids are outdoor kids. They like to be outside and playing in the woods and things like that, which you can't do when you're living on a busy street with a patch of grass in front of your house, in front of your apartment in the city. So I think it was almost as much professional and personal, but that's at the same time. I mean, I think you got to a certain point where it's nice to have a new challenge. And I think when I was at Manhattanville for 10 years, and I'm not going to say it was like a rut or anything at the end, but I think at a certain point I was kind of going through the motions a little bit, doing the same thing kind of over and over, and trying to find different ways to be different and do new things. And I was just looking for a new opportunity. And I think it kind of reinvigorated me a little bit coming up to Union and kind of starting from scratch. And I think it's, you mentioned it, it's nice to, to have the same people that but at the same time, it's also kind of nice to get a fresh start and meet some new people who have different ideas and do things a little different ways. And, I have a full-time assistant, which I've never had before, which is really nice to be able to have a second person in the office. I can bounce stuff off and be like, hey, you can work late this night, and I don't have to worry about being guilty about it because you don't have class that night, or you're not being paid $5,000 a year.
Right.
it's nice to have those things, to have, a full-time assistant. We have an intern too. The staff up here is great. So, it was a nice change. And I think it was something that was really, really, I think, needed for our family in order to grow and to kind of, keep things going in the right direction. Because I think just, said you get in the same place for a while and you get in a little bit of a rut. So it was nice to kind of have a fresh start for all of us.
You had mentioned just a few seconds ago about the opportunity now that you were going to, again, for the first time since your days at Northeastern, promote a Division I hockey program. So what has that, in your first couple of years, what has that experience been like for you?
It's been great. I love, bringing my son to games. It's been great being able to bring him in the press box, and, he loves watching the hockey games. I haven't actually been the contact in the first couple of years, which, in some ways has been kind of nice, where I can kind of enjoy the hockey, but not have to do the work necessarily that goes along with doing the hockey.
Right.
It's been fun doing that, but just, I think being around the program has been fun. The coaching staff is great. And just seeing the professionalism that they do have, it's been fun to watch, and seeing some kids, some draft picks from the NHL and going on and doing some good things. It's been fun for me. So I love being around hockey, but I love being around other sports too. I kind of chose to do basketball during the winters because I love doing basketball. I love being at the press, being at the table and seeing the kids and checking in and stuff like that. It's fun for me to do. So for me, it's been the best of both worlds, where I get to, have a lot of sports that I love, but at the same time, I get to watch the men's and women's hockey teams play all the time. And it's great to be a part of those programs in any way that I can be.
So in 2020, and we're going to get into COVID in a second, but the past year has just been, part of it has just been so difficult because we haven't been able to work shoulder to shoulder, or I should say even now, not without masks, to work alongside our coworkers. But, despite, the year that has been, what has it been like, your just overall your first 2+ years so far at Union?
I mean, it's been great, kind of as I said earlier, it's kind of given me a fresh start here a little bit, and be able to do some new things that I haven't, that I didn't get a chance really to do them in Handville. I've been doing some more feature writing that, we talked about earlier. It's something I like to do. So I've been doing some feature stories and things like that, and really just, trying to get back to different things that I'd like to do. And I think it's kind of given me a little reinvigorated my career. I think a little bit. It's given me some different things that I have to do, that I want to do. And obviously, there's been a tremendous staff around here. Our athletic director is incredibly supportive of our office, and I think he sees the value in our office, which I think a lot of ADs do. Maybe not everyone, but he's been very supportive of us, and it's been really great to work with the coaches that we do have here. That really they care about the students. And I think most coaches do that. I'm not saying that's necessarily just a Union thing, because for the most part, if you're going to be a college coach, you have to care about the student athletes.
Yeah, sure.
But,
absolutely.
I really just enjoy working with the teams that I do work with, and getting to know the kids. And I think that's been fun for me now. I'm in my third year. So, next year will be my fourth year, and the freshmen will be seniors. So I'll kind of have a full 4-year class, you could say, of students coming through. And that's been great to kind of get to know people. I think, the first year was definitely a little jarring, because I didn't know anyone. The kids didn't know me, and it was kind of a learning curve for everyone. But you do it for a couple of years, and now you get a little familiar with everybody and the coaching staff and the players. And it's been great. I really enjoy it. We have a lot of sports. Dealing with crew for the first time, dealing with football for the first time. I'd never dealt with football until I came here, and that was one thing. It was kind of one of those things on the list where, I always said to myself, if Manhattanville added football, I'll quit the next day. But now I'm working at a football school, and I really enjoy it. It's fun to be at the games. They're events more than anything else. And it helps the teams really good that they were nationally ranked, I guess, 2 years ago now, since they didn't play this past year. But it's fun to do those different sports, and to be able to branch out into different things. Swimming and diving I've never done before, and try and bring new things to them too. Talking to the swimming and diving coach, saying, hey, we want to start streaming your meets. So, like, can you do that? I'm like, sure, we can do that. We'll figure it out. Soccer games, let's stream those. We're trying to stream tennis this year for the first time. It's all these things where it's, let's try to do new things. Let's try to figure out creative ways to get stuff done. And, the coaches are really appreciative of that. And I think that's one of the biggest things, like, as an SID, if your coaches, are appreciative of what you're doing and are thankful for what you're doing, and they show that appreciation, I mean, that makes all the difference in the world to what you're doing in your job.
You had mentioned about your ability now to write feature stories and really address a new avenue for your career, and that ultimately led to you, receiving to being named the general feature winner of COSIDA's Fred Stabley writing contest. So, can you describe a little bit about what that story was about, and what receiving that honor meant to you, especially because you had the opportunity to write about your student athletes?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a little different because of all the student athletes that I wrote about had already graduated at that point. So I was kind of more just kind of telling the story of what had happened. But the men's lacrosse team, they started the Gift for Life bone marrow drives on campus in somewhere around 2011 or 2012, and I started talking with one member of the coaching staff, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we've had like 4 or 5 guys now that have given bone marrow from this drive over the last like 8 or 9 years." I'm like, that's a lot. It's like, yeah, I guess it is. And eventually we found out we had, I think, 6 or 7 of our former student athletes, either from that drive or from another one, had given bone marrow and helped to save people's life. And it's a pretty cool, it was a pretty cool thing. And I just be able to talk to the people who had given the bone marrow, their, I guess, appreciation of, literally they took a swab and figured out if they're a match or not. They go in and, you have a little bit of a surgery or whatever, and you save someone's life. And talking to them about how they, met their donor afterwards, and how appreciative their families were and their communities were. And, the idea that literally you saved someone's life by, doing something really not that difficult. Mm-hmm. It was really cool for me to be able to tell that story. So, like things like that, I'm really excited of getting the opportunity to talk about now. And, we just had a Hockey Humanitarian Award finalist who's done some great work in our community with some local kids and bringing them to hockey games and things like that. So, finding those stories has always kind of been a passion of mine. It's just been something we haven't gotten a ton of time in order to do it, and I think, right. To talk about the Stabley, writing contest, I'm one of the judges at the regional level. I swear I didn't judge myself. I didn't give myself an award. So Jeff Bernstein would kill me if I said that. But we had, I think, something like 400 entries this year. We had the most we've ever had, and it's been, I don't know if it's because of COVID, people have had more time to sit down and actually do writing, as opposed to in the past when they were doing social media and video and all these other things. But I love, one of my favorite things about that job is just reading the stories and reading the features and the profiles and the event coverage and things like that. That there are some really, really gifted writers that we do have around the country, and it's nice to be able to recognize them in a time when, as I said, a lot of people, if it's not in 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs, they're going to skip right over it or try to get the cliff notes or whatever the case may be. But I think there's still a good space for a good feature story somewhere. So it's nice to see those being recognized, and I'm trying to keep those going. At least my goal right now is try to do 1 a year. That's my thing. I'm not originally like, I should do like 1 a month or whatever the month, and that I quickly realized that's not going to happen. But if I try to do like 1 or maybe 2 a year to kind of really do some good things, that'll be good enough for me for now.
No, those human interest stories are just so important, and even for myself, they've just become such a vital part of our jobs, and just a lot of fun to talk about, because it just goes so far away from the norm, and it goes so far away from just talking about what our student athletes do on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever it may be, and just talks about them as human beings and what they're enduring and what they're going through. It's just such a way that not that it completes yourself, or it completes anything. It's just great to give, to display more about the student athlete than just the fact that they're a lacrosse player, they're a soccer player, or whatever sport they may play, that there's more to them, that they endure hardships the same we do, and it's great to publicize it and promote it.
And that's what, one of the things I love about Union is, we have students here that are, the leading scorer on the basketball team and also the head of the, like the ceramics club on campus, and they have a 3.95 GPA, and they're doing tour guides, and they're doing all these activities on campus. And, I was doing some interviews with our coaches in the fall, and, like there's no one on campus that's just a lacrosse player or just a, football player or whatever. They're doing 8-10 other things on campus, and I have no idea how they do it. Like I would go crazy trying to figure out my schedules and trying to fit everything in over the course of a day. But they're so active on campus doing a bunch of different things, and it's funny. You talk to them and they're like, oh yeah, if I didn't have practice for 2 hours a day every day, I don't know what I'd do. Like my structure of my day would be completely messed up. I'd have so much free time, and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Like, more power to you. If you like that structure and you're able to do all those things at once, then that's great. And I'm constantly in awe of what our student athletes are doing on and off the field, just because there's so many great stories there to tell. It's hard sometimes to pick the ones that you want to flesh out, because there's so many different options you could go with.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about last March. We had said at the top of the broadcast that we had just surpassed the 1 year mark since the COVID-19 shutdown. So let's go back a year today. And can you just take us through the events on what happened on Union's campus when the announcement came down that, fateful day that collegiate sports was coming to an end, at least temporarily?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I think I mentioned earlier, March 11th, we had our last game. Men's lacrosse had a big win, and I sat in the press box, and like, okay, we at that point, we kind of got the sense that, stuff might be happening. And actually we had one of our students was in the locker room before the game, and our coach gave a really great speech saying, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We got today. That's all we got. We get this game right now. We get tonight. We'll figure everything else after this, and, kind of go from there. And it completely rang true, because, it was the last game that we had, and we still haven't had one since then. So, that was on the 11th. The 12th, Union had their first positive case on campus, and I texted my wife, and I'm like, I'm not going to work tomorrow, and I don't know when I'm going back.
Yeah,
it was really surreal on the 12th there to be in my office, and I'm sitting looking around, going, okay, what might I need if I'm going to be home for a couple of weeks?
Only a couple weeks.
Because that was, I guess at that point, that was kind of the mindset. Like, all right, we'll go home. We'll go home for a little bit, and we'll, see what happens, and we'll come back in, and we'll figure it out. I think we knew it wasn't going to be right away, but I certainly didn't envision that I was going to go 6 months or whatever it was before seeing my office again. That's perfectly honest. But yeah, so then, we were home on the 13th, my son's birthday. He went to school that day, had cupcakes or whatever at school, came home, and went 6 months without going back to school again. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of like it stopped. And, we had to cancel plans for his birthday party that weekend, and it threw everything just into a complete tailspin there. So it was, it was tough. And I think, I said earlier, we had some teams that were on pace to do some really good things. We had a runner was in Indianapolis for the NCAA indoor track and field championships. They were getting ready to, he was on a practice run, I think, or whatever. It was going to start the next day. And then all of a sudden, word trickles down. No, never mind. Everyone's going to go home now. And it's like, well, he can be an All-American. Come on. Now, can't we at least wait one more day? But, they shut it down. And it was like, it was such a letdown, I think, at that point, to just go from games and games, which, we're used to having so many games and being so busy. Then all of a sudden it's just nothing. Like, what do you do? How do you fill that time? And what do you do during your day? And, there was definitely, a week or two where, it was tough trying to figure out what to do. What are we going to do with our jobs? What are things going to look like? Are we going to have jobs? That's the big thing, furloughs start coming out and things like that. Like, what can we do to prove that we still, deserve getting a paycheck? So it was definitely a stressful time, at work and at home, just because all the unknown, we didn't know what was going on. So it was definitely tough, but we got through it, and our administration of the school saw that we needed at least one person in the SID office, which was good, and that ended up being me. And it was tough. My assistant was furloughed, my intern was furloughed. They had a tough summer where they weren't doing anything for 3 or 4 months. So it was difficult for me trying to take on all the loads of 3 different people, trying to figure out what we're doing for our year-end awards banquet and all these type of things that you kind of take for granted that happen at the end of a school year that were just completely different now. So it was certainly not the easiest thing by any stretch of the imagination, but like anything, we kind of just get through it. You figure out ways to move forward and figure out new things to do, and kind of just worked at it from there. But it was very difficult. Comparing to the fall and the winter, which were expected. The spring just go from 60 to 0 in a heartbeat. Was
yeah. Tough. No, there were just so many emotions, Steve, between when you look at the winter season and the student athletes, the basketball student athletes that were supposed to play in the NCAA tournament or were playing in the NCAA tournament in Division III, and the indoor track and field student athletes that had to be sent home, or the spring teams that were down in Florida and came home and were told their seasons were canceled. It just there were no words to describe it. And on top of that, you had mentioned about earning that paycheck and how all of our jobs were really put under a magnifying glass, and to say, do we consider these individuals as essential to the day-to-day working environment, because how much money do these schools have, and can we afford to keep them on payroll? So you had mentioned about moving forward. So on a personal level and a professional level, how did you find yourself able to push forward, and then on a professional level to also just keep content fresh?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a challenge at the start. I mean, I definitely spent a couple of weeks where I was like, what am I going to do if we don't have games? What can we put up on the website? And I'm sure if someone looks back at our Twitter account, Instagram account, there's a decent gap there. We're not putting anything on the website or putting anything on social media, just because I was kind of in shock myself, just trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think obviously, SID is in some ways a very copycat type business, where you look around, you're like, okay, these schools are doing profiles of coaches or profiles of student athletes. We did a lot of senior spotlights where, we're kind of looking at our seniors in the spring and say, they're not going to get those senior days. They're not going to get this recognition that they're usually getting. Let's try to, give them a forum to talk about their careers, about their times, what it was like to have their senior seasons end. So we did that for a while. I think that was pretty well received. I got some, one player emailed me. He's like, this is the first time I've really ever thought about, my last game and what it means to me and what it means to be a student athlete at Union. So thank you for, giving me that opportunity. So that was nice to kind of find some ways to recognize those seniors. I think that was one of the biggest things for us. And even when we went to our year-end awards that, at the end of the school year, we sat down and we were like, what, we got to find a way to, if we can have a tie between 2 seniors for every senior award, let's go with that. Like, the more seniors we can honor with these things, the better. If we have to order a couple more awards and go a little over budget with some things, let's do it, because these kids, they deserve it. So
and the more coming back, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was one thing that we really tried to do, is focus on the students that we did have, and try to find ways to engage with them, to highlight them, showcase the things that they were doing. And that took up, a decent amount of time, I think, up until, May or something like that. Obviously, Union's on a trimester schedule. We're a little different from most schools. So we're going, till beginning of June. Whereas, most schools are done, most schools are done in early May, and we're graduating in the middle of June. So,
oh, wow.
We had kids on campus for a little bit longer. We were able to, see them a little bit longer, which was nice. And have our awards banquet in, the middle of June. So we had plenty of time to prepare for that, which was nice. So it was, it was tough. And I think in some ways I'm still, I'm thankful we have games coming up, just because it's hard to kind of do all these different things. And, over the course of the school year, I started working in the communications office as well, doing, a lot of the social media for the college, in addition to doing the stuff for athletics. So it's kind of, balancing two masters at that point where it's like, oh, I have this great idea for something that I could put up on the Union Athletics Instagram account, but it also would work well on the Union College account, and they have like 6 times the followers we do. So I guess we'll put it up on that one instead. I became very, very obsessed with likes and engagement and stuff like that, and it's like I put up one thing on our account and it gets a couple hundred, and I put up one on the school account and it's at 1,500, 1,600. I'm like, oh man, this is so much better than the stuff I put up on our account.
Remote teaches us a lot, Steve. There's no doubt about it, and just doesn't make it worth it to be putting in effort on certain things if it's not drawing the engagement that you hope it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of been a timeless argument on social media. The fancy graphics that look really cool, but if you put up a good photo that's taken at a game, that's going to be better more often. 9 times out of 10 people are going to go for those type of things. And it's tough when you look at schools like the Ohio States and Clemson's, like the bowl teams for football programs that have 8-person digital media departments. And I'll be honest, my AD was guilty of that over the summer, where he'd send me a link, be like, oh, this cool thing that Virginia Tech did. And I'm like, I can't do I can't do that. Like, there's no, I need like a 4-person team, and maybe we'll be able to do some of the things that they're doing with like videos and things like that. I'm like, I appreciate the sentiment, but it's not happening. You have to know your expectations and know your limits there. So. It's hard sometimes to look at some of those schools and see what they're producing and be like, oh man, it'd be great to do that stuff, but it's just you can't do it. The D3 level, and even for us, it's kind of hard sometimes, since we do have Division I hockey, where you have all D1 hockey programs that have SIDs that are basically just doing hockey. They have basically one sport all year, and that's that's generally speaking what they do. It's like our coaches come and be like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? Like, well, we can maybe do a version of that, a little bit scale it down, trying to keep up with teams that way. Whereas, we're not a Division I sports management office. We're two and a half people basically we have in our office. So,
right.
We obviously do the best we can. We try to keep up as best we can, but it's tough to keep up with the BUs and BCs of the world and stuff like that, when we also have to deal with the swimming diving team and the field hockey team and things like that, where we're trying to do stuff at the same time. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we do the best we can. I think we do a pretty good job.
It shows how essential it's become now to try to have somebody that we're starting to see the title more of multimedia manager that handles more of the graphic design and the maybe not so much all of the social media end, but really helps to draw and build the engagement.
That's what I said. I'm in the process of hopefully soon hiring a full-time assistant, which I've never had the chance to do before. So I'm definitely going to go into it and be like, okay, you're going to be in charge of this. You're going to be in charge of this. You're going to do all these things that I've never been able to do with GAs. You can't give them that type of responsibility right off the bat. So it's right. I've never had the opportunity to hire a full-time person before, so it'll be a welcome change, I think, this time around, to try to figure out somebody that's hopefully get some experience under their belt that can come in and try to help us and do some new things for us and try to complement the way that I do things. I think that's what I'm looking for. What you really look for, I think, ideally in an office, is people that have different skill sets, that have different things they do well, that complement each other. I think that's the best way to run a department. And, I don't want someone that's going to do the exact same thing that I'm doing, because that's not necessarily the best thing to be doing in many ways. So, it's going to be an interesting time, and hopefully you'll get someone over the summer and start back up fresh in the fall.
Steve, I want to take a few minutes here, and I just want to reflect on what we've been seeing over the last number of months with regards to racial and gender inequality right now in intercollegiate and professional sports. Obviously, we could speak a little more, on our end from the intercollegiate side, maybe more than the professional side, where we'd not saying we're not basing anything off fact, but again, it's all opinion anyway. But and how we really need to reflect change upon that. So the first thing I want to talk about is what we've seen a lot recently, I guess, so far at the Division I college basketball tournament, which has been the rise of the hashtag not NCAA property, and how student athletes are looking to have legislation change that reflects name, image, and likeness. Now, I know you have a little bit of experience working Division I in your time at Northeastern. You handle a Division I hockey program now, but this this expands more than Division I. This expands student athletes being able to use their name to eventually get compensated off of it. So what has been your take on the rise of this hashtag not NCAA property, and how these student athletes should proceed in going forward about it to try and change the way things are?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a really unique situation. I mean, you have, the kids, obviously, the bowl division in football where they're, incredibly famous. And I think they, have the ability to go out and do whatever they want. And, to have that notoriety, that likeness that is as powerful as it can be, and they don't get, I think talking about they get tuition, they should be okay with just getting tuition and things like that. But the NCAA and the big time college, it's a business. I mean, I think it's something where you can say that they're amateurs and they don't get paid, so none of this should matter. But I mean, the NCAA is $1 billion operation. I mean, looking at March Madness last year, not having March Madness, like how much that threw the whole entire NCAA into a tizzy just because they were losing so much money. And, us at Division III, it's like, well, that funds like half of Division III based off of the March Madness money that comes in. It's like, is that really the best system? That's the best way that we should be going about doing this, where, 64 basketball teams are essentially funding entire divisions. It's certainly a tough situation, and I think the student athletes deserve to have some sort of level of compensation. I think you look at some of the big time D1 programs. The football team will fund almost every other sport on campus. Michigan, I think it's Michigan, where one home game funds 8 different sports or something along those lines. Like, it's crazy to think the power that they have. And it's been interesting to see how, college athletes and certainly pro athletes too, at different levels, starting to wield that power. It's almost like they just realized that they're actually able to do stuff, and they're not just, stay in their lane. They're not, stick to dribbling or whatever they would say to LeBron, about sticking to sports and all that type of stuff. So, it's been, I guess, kind of refreshing to see them try to use their power to move things forward and to make some progress. Whereas in the past, it was kind of just, stick your head down, just do what you need to do, and just keep the status quo going.
Some other piece that we've seen with regards to the NCAA Division I men's and women's basketball championships is the lack of equity between accommodations, and we saw the TikTok that went viral across the internet to show the difference in accommodations between what the men were having and what the women were having. So in your opinion, based on what you've seen over your career so far, Steve, how can we change that narrative?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, I know, everyone will say, the men's basketball tournament, people watch it, it makes money, and all type of stuff, where the women one doesn't. But I mean, you'd think ideally, in the terms of the NCAA, a sport's a sport. It really shouldn't matter what they're bringing in revenue wise. I mean, you look at Division III, everything is pretty much the same, I guess, for the most part, just because there's no money involved. There's no, the men's basketball tournament's not going to be bringing in more than the women's basketball tournament, or whatever the case may be. So, in some ways, the Division III model might be the better way to go, even though it's definitely not, I think, realistic. I think we try to, promote our teams as best we can. And, I know that's one of the questions that we have on our year-end interviews every year is, what can you do to, promote gender equality and try to, promote the women's teams as much as the men's teams. And it's hard sometimes because, especially like on our campus, they gravitate to football and they gravitate to men's hockey. Like those are the two biggest sports we have by far. And we have a men's hockey team that, won the national championship in 2014. And we had a women's hockey team that, right around that same time didn't win a game the entire year. And I know there was, this is before me, but there was a lot of pressure on union and the administration to figure out what's going on with, the women's program when they can't even win a game. And now Coach Keep has come in. I think they're definitely trying to take steps forward, and I think it's our job to promote the women's team, as much, if not maybe even try to more so than the men's teams. Try to find ways to promote them in different aspects. Try to find ways to build the program and try to have a bit of ownership on our own right of trying to find ways to do things right by those programs. So. It's a challenge sometimes, like we'll have, media requests and stuff like that for a men's hockey team. And it's like, okay, well, at the same time, hey, women's hockey team is doing a cancer awareness game this week. Hey, let's bring them into the press conference too. Let's try to find ways to integrate them into the local media as well, to try to get their names out there, get their faces out there, and, just try to find ways to kind of tag along to try to move themselves forward that way. But it definitely is a challenge, because you have certain sports that just the media gravitate towards, that fans gravitate towards, and you do, I guess, everything you can, but it definitely is hard. It's a shame. I think that's one of the biggest things that's tough for me. Everyone asks me, what's your favorite sporting event? And like my favorite sporting event is the College World Series, the Women's College World Series. If that's on TV, I'm stopping what I'm doing and I'm watching that game until midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever. I love watching college softball. It's my favorite sport to watch. But most people wouldn't even think of turning on softball, whereas I think baseball is kind of boring at this point. So it's difficult to try to draw those people's eyes from what they're accustomed to. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that everyone's accustomed to men's basketball and football and men's hockey, and it's been nice to see. I think women's hockey's made some good strides the last couple of years. Women's basketball, I think, is certainly very popular, and I think it's been nice the last couple of weeks seeing so many people promoting women's basketball on social media and saying, if you watch the men's tournament, you should be watching the women's tournament, or there's no men's games today, turn on the women's games. And I think hopefully this the outrage over the strength and conditioning rooms, will get some more eyes on the women's game. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that everyone says that the men's the ratings are higher than the women's, that's why they should deserve more money, and that's a completely outdated, archaic argument. But until we get more people watching those games, then it's going to be hard to break those stereotypes.
So to piggyback off that, what do you feel are the next best steps, in your opinion, to advocate for women's sports not even just women's sports, but women in sports, and the gender inequality that we've been seeing going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things I hate to say, our field, the athletic communications field, is so heavily male dominated that it's hard in many ways for qualified females to break into the field. Yeah. And I think it's one of those cases there that if we can get more, I know they talk about, getting more females into coaching positions, but I think we need to try to find a way to get some more females in the SID positions as well. Yep. And, we talked about, at COSIDA a couple of years ago, I think it was Frank had a really good panel on, family dynamics and, what it's like to be an SID. And there was, a couple of male SIDs, and there was one wife on there. And I came home and I talked to my wife about it, and she turned to me and she said, were there any husbands of female SIDs on there? And I said, no. I said, pretty much the entire room was males. And she says, I think that's part of the problem, is that there's no way for women to look up and be like, okay, I can do this. I can be a woman in this field and have a supportive husband at home that can, take care of stuff, as opposed to
great point.
The classical way of everyone doing the other way around, where the male works and the wife is home with the kids. And I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that as much as anybody. My wife takes the brunt of the burden for large parts of the school year. It's been one of the nice things about the last year, is I've been able to actually be home and try to repay things at least a little bit for 13 years or whatever of not being around that much.
Right.
But it's tough to when they can't get into the field. And I've had an intern this year who's a female, and I'm really trying to find someone potentially for this full-time job that is qualified, that can really bring diverse opportunities and different viewpoints of what we want to do here in the office. So, I think that's one of the bigger things, is trying to get more females in the field. And I know COSIDA is trying to do that as well. And they have some women in leadership who are doing some great things right now. And, it's something that's just got to be a continual process. I think, you can talk about it all you want, but if there's not, there's not progress, there's not actual action that goes along with it, then, it doesn't do that much.
Yeah, and there's a lot of women on committee that are leading committees. Then there's also Wosider as well, and the next president of COSIDA at the end of the athletic year will be a female, and Cindy Potter. So that just great to see more and more women embracing, not even embracing, or being in leadership roles, and hopefully we continue to see that going forward. So as we start to wrap up this interview, Steve, I want to ask that, looking back up into your career at this point that has spanned a decade and a half, what mostly made you want to work? Because you had said that really, even though you there was no communications major at Colgate, you had said that you still wanted to get yourself involved in extracurricular activities and societies. But what ultimately was that driving decision that made you want to work in collegiate athletics?
I mean, I think it was working the games. I mean, that's the biggest. That was the biggest thing for me, is the highs and lows of working games. I mean, I joke all the time that a lot of times I take losses harder than the players do, because I just I like that competition, and I was never much of a real athlete myself, so I think in some ways I kind of live vicariously through the student athletes, and
sure,
that's been that's been the most fun for me, is just being at the games. And obviously the day-to-day stuff during the week sometimes can be grind, but spending 2-3 hours at a game, and I don't consider that work at all. And it's fun for me to do and to be there. And now I get to bring my kids to those games, and they get to enjoy them. It's even more, it's more enjoyable for me to do that. And that's been the biggest thing that I love about the job.
As you look back on so many years, do you ever say to yourself one day or another that this is where I was meant to be, that I don't even see the sports information industry as work, that this is just where exactly I was meant to be, and this is my career?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. I mean, no, I can't see myself doing anything else, and trust me, I've tried. There's certainly been times where I said, what, maybe I should try to get out and try to do X, Y, Z, and it's just I can't see it. It's just one of those things where it's now at this point it's kind of ingrained in me. Working on a college campus has been great, and I want to see myself continuing to do that, and eventually I'd love to have my kids eventually go to Union, and maybe work in my office or be an athlete that I get to cover and things like that. I'd love to see that something down the road, but I mean,
I wonder if your wife would be okay with that, though.
But at this point, I see myself doing this. I can't see myself doing anything else at the moment.
Is there one thing, I guess, that just sticks out in your mind that you say so many years later today in 2021 that you say this is the one thing I would change about the business?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I mean, for me, like doing social media stuff like that's a full-time job. Like it's something where in many professions and businesses and stuff like that, you have someone who is the social media person, and that is all they do is social media. Whereas in our job, that's like, not necessarily a throwaway, but it's like, oh yeah, that's a part you have to do, but then you also have to do the press releases and the photography and video work and graphic design and writing stories and all these type of things. It's like there's so many different aspects that go into the jobs, and it doesn't seem like the staffs are growing certainly proportionally to the amount of job that's being put on our plates. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is just especially now, being a one-man shop for the spring, like the list of things I have to do on a daily basis is just daunting. And it's like, I try to do a couple things, and you get kids that expect this, and they expect media days, and they expect all these things. It's like, well, I can't do that. There's not enough hours in the day. So I think that's the one thing that I wish that you still see a bunch of people around the country in one-person shops doing 25 sports by themselves. And I'm lucky that in normal circumstances I have a couple people in my office with me, but I don't know how you can have a school that has one SID doing everything, or some schools that will fold the SID office completely in the communications office and not have a full-time SID, things like that. Right. I don't know how that's possible, and I think we need to continue to try to find ways to impress on college presidents and ADs, I guess, to a certain extent too. What our role is, what we do on our campuses, and how important it is. Because I mean, I think I said earlier, it's a young man's field, a young woman's field. It's not something where once you get a family, it's tough to miss weekends every single year. Every single weekend for 8-9 months out of the year, and have a family and have a normal family life. So it's definitely tough to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we moved up here, is that I'm closer to home. I'm able to sneak out between, before a 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock game. I can go home, have dinner, and come back, which has been, kind of a game-changing thing for me for a couple of years now. So that's been great, in bringing my kids to games. But not everyone has the ability to do that, and it's tough. So I think that's, for me, that's the biggest thing. Is just there's so many responsibilities, and the staffs are not necessarily increasing with the amount of work that's being put on us.
Yeah, and it seems like that in just about every profession now, where so many jobs today are no longer 9 to 5, 40-hour work weeks. So you clock in at 9 and you're out at 5, and you have Saturdays and Sundays off, and it takes a toll, for sure, for those of us, you and me both, that have families and want to be a want to be a dad and then a husband and an SID all at the same time. It's very, very difficult.
I think that's been one of the things of the pandemic. One of the lasting things people say is, now like the 9 to 5 workday is kind of dead. It's like, well, no, you can get on a Zoom call at 8:30 in the morning in your pajamas or whatever, just sit at the kitchen table and do that. You can answer emails at 8 o'clock at night. You can do everything virtually. So you have to do stuff more often. So that's definitely a negative, I think, that's happened over the last couple of months and last year, that hopefully we can kind of rewind that a little bit and get back to more of a normal type work schedule.
Yeah, there's no such thing anymore as a snow day in school. It doesn't exist. The incorporation of Zoom has changed everything. As we wrap this up here, Steve, a couple of last questions I wanted to ask you as our interview just about approaching 2 hours. Who would you say in your life, whether it be professionally, personally, has just been your biggest inspiration that has helped you achieve to where you are today?
I don't know if I can necessarily pick out one or two. I mean, I think, John and Doug is two of the ones that they got me started. So, I mean, looking up to them and seeing them in their full-time roles when I was, an intern and an assistant, I think that was, that was huge for me to see those two that were doing their jobs well and showing me that it can be done. Mm-hmm. They were certainly, very big ones for me. I mean, it's cliche to say my parents, they were, huge inspirations and role models for me. They were able to put me through college, and, they did so much for me when I was younger. And even when I got out of college, as I said, able to work to live at home and to be able to, save up money while I got my first couple of jobs out of college was, kind of life-changing in order to be able to do that and not rack up debt from college and all that type of stuff. So those are, obviously very, very important figures in my life. But, I think just that there are so many really good SIDs out there that, I talked about, just like trolling social media and try to find, people that are doing good things. Like, there's so many impressive SIDs that are doing so many really good things that,
yeah, absolutely.
It's such a great community that you can go and look and see what people are doing and be like, okay, I can take something from what this person's doing. I can take something from what this person's doing and try to, you use others as inspirations for what you can do in your day-to-day work life in the office. So I think for me, it's more just like kind of the collective unit of, all the different SIDs, and whether it's in your league, your conference, your region, a lot of great SIDs here in the capital region that we all kind of bounce ideas off each other. We help each other at games and things like that. It's so many other people that are around that are doing good things. It's really easy to draw inspiration from others.
We always say in the SID industry that everybody's just a phone call away or an email away, and that we're always willing to help each other out. I think that's something that's stood the test of time, that communication never goes away, that even though we might live in a world today where everything's just text me this or Facebook chat me that, but the old phone call always still goes a long way. for those, and you had mentioned how you had lost, your intern and your assistant, and due to furloughs, and we're seeing that more and more, and it seems like that's starting to stop a little more, and we're seeing those who had lost their jobs start to retain their positions or obtain new positions. But what could you say to those people that right now we're seeing so many schools in the thick of hiring freezes, so many industries in the thick of hiring freezes? That what would be your advice right now to an aspiring SID that wants to finally get their foot in that door? Like, how would you tell them to keep their head high?
Yeah, I mean, it's you got to believe in yourself. I think it's getting started is hard. I said I got incredibly lucky to throw my resume at a table and get picked up for a job. That I didn't even know what it was. Whereas I think today, if I tried to do that, I probably wouldn't even get an interview at most places, because you have kids in college that are doing video work and working for their SID's office and as undergrads. And, I think for me, like when I'm looking for people to work with me, it's not the major, it's not the grades, it's what experience you have. And, when I was up in Hattonville, I would talk at a communications class for a couple of times, and, the professor was sitting in the back of the room, and I'd start and I'd say, Professor, no offense, but I don't care what grade these kids get in your class. Like, what if they get an A, a B, a C? I don't care what they get. I want to know what they're doing. What experience they have doing video work or social media or writing or whatever the case is. It's not classwork; it's about experience. And I try to tell people that whatever you can do as an undergraduate, try to do whatever you can just to get yourself a resume. And for kids, for coming out of college, it stinks that your first job is probably not going to be very high paying. A lot of the first entry level jobs in college athletics, a lot of people want them because they're working in sports and everything. So a lot of them don't pay a ton. And I'll be honest, our intern position is one of those as well. It's one of those where you do it for a year and hopefully move on to different things from there. So I think if you love this job, if you find it's something that you want to do, you'll find a way to get through it. But you got to get through those first couple of years. And I think that was definitely a case there where I wasn't making a lot of money in my first 2 years, and you kind of just slogged through it. And you do it for a bit, and hopefully you look for a breakthrough. So I think hard work obviously is going to carry you a lot there. If you're someone that can show that they're dependable, that they're hardworking, that you can be adaptable and do new things, then you're going to catch on somewhere. It's just a matter of trying to be adaptable and maybe not necessarily be tied down to a certain place. If you're young, if you're single, go somewhere exotic if you want. Try to don't be afraid of going across the country. You find somewhere different. That's something that I think I tell some of my younger assistants as well. It's like, hey, don't be afraid to just try something different, try something new, and try to find your niche in a certain area. Don't be tied down to a certain place if you don't have to be. So, it's tough, but if you can showcase what experience you have and try to find some way to differentiate you from someone else on a piece of paper, then you'll be doing all right. But it's definitely not easy. And I think that's the biggest thing is what I usually tell kids is that, if you want to get in the field, you're going to have to want it. And it's not, you can't do it half-heartedly.
No. And it's, as you had mentioned, it doesn't start out very high paying, but at the same time, it's not a very forgiving field. It's not a 40-hour a week field. It's a 60 to 70-hour a week field. And when you're in crossover season, it's even more than that. So as I tell people that walk into my office or have come to me to look for a job or for some entry-level experience, I say I treat you the same as I would treat any other full-time employee that would work for me. And, I expect the same output and expect the same type of work in a way, because really once you get your first full-time job in the business, this is exactly what they're going to be expecting of you. So that's why I expect it of them so early on in their careers as well. Steve, just lastly, I know you had said that over the pandemic that you had moved and you'd bought a house, but I guess in the interim, while we were still on, while we still had a pandemic and while we were enduring just being home every single day, what were some additional hobbies? Were you a big Netflix guy? I mean, what have you been doing the last 12 months?
My Netflix is whatever my wife turns on. That's the extent of my Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all that type of stuff, and Hulu. I basically, for the most part, watch whatever she turns on. Let's face it. I tried to. I did a lot of reading last year. I'm very big into crossword puzzles. I love the New York Times crossword.
Oh, wow.
Puzzle. I do that every day. Sudokus. They do New York Times as different games, word games, and things like that. I'm very much like I'm a Latin major. I like to write. I'm very much grammar and kind of language, those type of things. So I love crossword puzzles, Sudokus, all those type of things. And that's pretty much the one thing that takes up a lot of my time. And I try to read when I can, but I'm not as good of a reader as I should be. My wife reads, a couple books a week usually in many cases, where it takes me a lot longer to read, but I try to keep up.
Books a week. That's impressive. I mean, I would say my wife could do that too, but it would take me a while.
Yeah, she usually has a couple books going at one time, so it's kind of like I don't know how she does it, but I'm not nearly as voracious a reader as she is.
So I'll make sure to add to Steve Sheridan's resume, brain teaser expertise. So that's. But Steve, thank you so much for coming on this evening. We really appreciate you joining us here on the Primetime Rundown interview series, and for sharing your experiences over the past decade and a half with us, and just wishing many good things for you at Union. And I'm sure you got to be very excited again for your first game in well over a year tomorrow. So really enjoy.
I'll talk to you tomorrow night. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully everything goes smoothly, everything goes all right, and come away with the victory, and everything goes well. And it's the more than wins and losses. I think just having games played is going to be the biggest thing for the spring. So hopefully we can get some games in. Everything goes well, and kind of get ourselves back to normal. So it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'd love to hear about it, Steve. So you know how to reach me in case you want to talk to me about it.
Absolutely, and appreciate it.
Well, Steve, just hang on for 1 second as we just want to wrap up and let everybody know what's coming up on the Eastern Observer. Amp up your wrestling fix with the Daily Wrestling News Show with Minutes to Bell Times. Ryan Joy every Monday through Thursday in the morning, starting at 10 a.m. And then on Tuesday night, that is the wrong graphic. And then on Tuesday night, tune into the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Al Carl, Tyler Adele, John Smith, the aforementioned Ryan Joy, John DeConi, and Gary Mihefe, with coverage beginning at 6 p.m. That's this Tuesday, March 30th. And then don't miss their upcoming WrestleMania special as the EWP gang gets you ready for wrestling's main event. That will be Saturday, April 10th at 3 o'clock. And then every Friday at 6 p.m., Joey, Rob, and myself get you updated on what is happening in sports on the Primetime Rundown. We will actually be coming to you twice this week. Be sure to look out for a show this Wednesday that will preview the upcoming baseball season, which is just days away now with opening day a week from today. And then next Friday, April 2nd, we will be back live with you to get you ready for the Final Four and recap what took place with the local teams on opening day and any other baseball news. That's the Primetime Rundown. Myself, Joey Jarzinka, Rob DeLuca, Fridays at 6 p.m. right here on the Eastern Observer. And all programming can also be seen on the I-95 Sports Network and Zingo Television, channel 198. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, or search I-95 Sports Network on YouTube. All of this powered by the Eastern Observer. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for my special guest, the Athletic Communications Director at Union College, Steve Sheridan. I'm Ian Schraier. Have a good night, everybody.